Welcome to RuralStrong, where we talk real challenges and bold solutions in rural economic development. I'm your host, Joe Barker. Let's get into it. Welcome to RuralStrong. This is Joe Barker, and we're broadcasting today from the Southwest Tennessee Development District podcast studio in beautiful downtown Jackson, Tennessee. And our guest today is Erich Zimmermann. Erich serves as the Executive Director of the National Association of Regional Councils based in Washington, D.C., representing regional councils, councils of governments, and metropolitan planning organizations across the United States. Erich, welcome to RuralStrong.
Hey, Joe. Pleasure to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure for us to have you as our guest. And, our organization is a regional council, and I always love talking to people where we all speak the same language. So tell our listeners a little bit about NARC and your membership, just to give them a little idea of your organization.
Sure. Happy to do that. So our membership, here at NARC, we are really positing ourselves as the national voice for regions. Our members span across the country in geographic areas of all sizes, and they work on a really vast number of issues, really as many issues as there are at the local or county level. Our members are involved in most or even all of those. And so it ranges from transportation, economic and community development, environmental and energy issues, emergency management. Some of our members even do direct service delivery. So it really ranges a really broad array of organizations, of geographies, of population sizes, and we're sort of the central organizing point for all of those organizations here in Washington.
Erich, how many regional councils across the nation are members of your organization?
We've got close to 200 members, but there's something like 550 or so, depending on how you do the count, of regional organizations that exist across the nation. So there's quite a few regional organizations out there doing great work. Some of them solely focused on one issue, economic development or transportation. Many of them, of course, working across those issues and doing a multitude of issues under the same roof.
And regional councils, our members are primarily local elected officials, and you're located in D.C., and you're really our voice in D.C. for all those programs that we must administer. So tell us a little bit about, being in D.C. and having to work with the federal government on a daily basis.
Well, it's never dull, I'll tell you that. There's always exciting and sometimes head-splitting activity going on here in Washington. There's always something happening here that is going to affect regional councils. So we're constantly on the lookout for some of that activity. Right now, we're in the midst, for example, of the transportation legislation has to be reauthorized for another 5 or 6 years. So that's a conversation that's ongoing. Congress just passed some housing legislation, some of the most consequential housing legislation that we've seen really in decades, I think, in this town. And so there's always a lot of activity going on, and we try and give not only regional voice on Capitol Hill to Congress, to the administration, but we also try and facilitate when our members want to come into town and have conversation with their elected officials here in Washington. As you mentioned, your board is made up of local elected officials. Similarly, our primary board is also made up of local elected officials, the same ones that serve on the regional organizations back at home. And so they really have a strong voice when they come up here to Washington. The elected officials here take really seriously what it is that a local elected officials have to say back at home. they know what's going on. They know the challenges. They know some of the solutions that will help solve those challenges. So I think the local elected officials have a really important voice here in the nation's capital.
Regional councils, many of them represent large metropolitan areas. Many regional councils are very rural. In an organization like NARC, how do you balance that where you've got the metropolitan areas and you've got the rural areas? Do you approach in your work both of them the same way, or do you have to take different approaches?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we've got regions ranging from the region in Los Angeles is over 19 million people down to very small regions of maybe 50,000 or even below that. So of course, there's going to be some differences between those regions, but we also find what we can do is also help accentuate the similarities and really one of the things that we do that we find to be some of our most important work really is engendering some of the conversation and connection between the regional organizations that exist across the country. If you're the leader of a regional organization, there's only one like you for quite a geographic distance. There's only several of you or of your type in the entire state that you're representing. And so what we do as an organization is provide that platform so that those directors and the staff that work under them really have an opportunity to share some of the commonalities, some of the differences, but some of the solutions, some of the challenges, really bring them together to have those conversations and find where they can connect with each other. But of course, we also offer some things where members that are, in smaller, that represent smaller communities have a chance to have some conversation amongst themselves, because there are some unique challenges and opportunities for for rural areas, for smaller metropolitan areas, and of course, for larger metropolitan areas as well. So it's a little bit of both. It's a bit of a balance, but we do find that getting everybody together in the room to have conversation with each other is a really powerful way for folks to go back home and feel re-energized in the work that they do and have some new ideas and new approaches to what it is they're trying to get done.
As you look at the landscape today, Eric, what are maybe two of the three of the real hot button issues that your local councils are really focused on right now?
Sure. Well, I think there's been a change in some of the political rhetoric and the dynamic that goes on and some of the conversations happening here in Washington between parties and among different folks with different points of view. And I think what we've really seen and what we've been hearing from members is that some of that is filtering down, has filtered down, unfortunately, to the local level and to some of the work that they do. Of course, our members, one of the roles that they often play within their community is not only the convening point for folks to come together to have conversation, they also do public outreach specifically on plans or projects, and that brings the public in to provide opinion. And some of the rhetoric and some of the conversation has really turned much more challenging, where the public servants that are either elected or not, or that work for our members, are becoming some of the target of some of the vitriol that's going on. And that's really unfortunate. That's something that members are deeply concerned about, because often it's younger staff, it's folks going out into the community to have these conversations, and they're getting reactions that are quite challenging, and often can feel personally or professionally sort of attacked based on that. So that's one thing. The discourse that is going on in our country right now is something that we've spent quite a bit of time focused on and really trying to find some ways to improve that, but also give some solutions how organizations can approach that type of an issue. And then I guess a little bit more specific issue would be the proliferation, of course, of data centers and of AI generally. That's a conversation. It feels very similar, frankly, to the housing conversation 10 years ago when it was really rising up to what felt a bit like an acute point where literally every member that we had was needed to find a way to engage on that issue. Well, that's where we are now, I think, with data centers. They're coming up everywhere. There aren't many geographies that are immune from the conversation, and members are really scrambling to try and find a way to ensure that they're protecting the interests of their towns, their residents, but also ensuring that the economic development that comes with that also can be met. So there's a real balance there, but there's a lot of information that our members are looking for right now. Some of which is hard to come by. It's hard to tell somebody exactly how to have these conversations with companies that are better resourced and have several benefits on their side. And I think we have a lot of members that are feeling a little bit put upon right now and are really trying to find solutions and ways to improve the tenor of that conversation as well.
In our region, as you said, is like regions all across the country. Data centers are popping up, and there's quite a bit of information out there. And sometimes I think, Eric, there's quite a bit of misinformation out there, and it's really a difficult situation for our local elected officials because, as you mentioned, there is definitely an economic impact on the community from the investment that these companies make. But we also have to take in mind our environment, our quality of life. Where do you see this going?
Oh, that is such a great question. I think what I'm hopeful for is that we get to a point where we have good, strong examples of the right way to site these types of facilities, where we have communities that are informed enough to ask for and demand the right type of development. But ultimately, one of the challenges that we really have here is that if community A says no to if they even have the capacity to say no, if they say no to this development, it's very easy to go to the city or county next door that may have lesser controls of, lesser land use controls or things like that. So I think really it's about providing examples of where this is being done best, of the companies that are building these that are doing it the right way, of the communities where they're being cited that are coming out of the process feeling good about it and not feeling put upon, and really highlighting those examples and hopefully sharing those out with everybody so that they can feel like they have what they need in order to do that. Of course, this is happening now, and that's going to take some time. So it's going to be a real challenge for some time now until we sort of get a better grip on how this is all going to shake out. But this feels like it's going to be with us for a while, and is a conversation worth figuring out how to manage in the best way.
One of the big challenges we have on the local level, and ultimately it certainly affects your organization, is the churn we have in local elected officials. In Tennessee right now, we have 95 counties, and all 95 of our county mayors are up for re-election this year. And traditionally, between retirement and those that just lose their position, we have almost a 50% turnover every 4 years. So your organization, when you get new elected officials, what do you do to try to bring them up to speed?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. So obviously, it's disruptive, especially for our member organizations as they're bringing on and having to onboard a new group of elected officials. Not every elected official is as in tune with the idea of regional approaches to a host of issues. In fact, in some ways, I worry that the polarization that we're seeing among, the political polarization that we're seeing makes it harder for folks that are coming in to really see the benefit of regional approaches, because it really does require you in some ways to put aside some of your own personal political feelings for the benefit of the entire region. It doesn't mean you let go of your standards or your ethics, but it does require you to come to the table to negotiate. And so really encouraging that type of approach, I find we can have at the among folks that are really sort of regional in their worldview, we can have really difficult conversations about really tricky topics, but they can be had in a way that feels productive and beneficial. And so that's I mean, when you've got a new crop of local elected officials coming in, I think one of the first things to do is to encourage them to get involved in regional work, because I think it does open eyes up to different ways of doing things and a different tenor of that conversation that's occurring there at the local level. So that would be one approach. We see it here as well. Our board, as I mentioned, is made up of local elected officials, and there's been some wild swings recently. We've lost several past presidents and several members of our board as well that have been caught up either in wild political swings from Democrat to Republican, or a couple of them caught up in conversations about data centers, and they were on the wrong side, at least as far as their voters were concerned, of some of the issues surrounding things like that. So we're seeing the same swings just among the small number of elected officials we have here on our board. It really is it's a challenge to have those swings. You lose some of that institutional knowledge, and but these are also the will of the voters, and so you respect that for sure. But it is disruptive to the work at the regional level.
Let's talk about housing a little bit. You mentioned the bill that just passed is transformative. Give us sort of a high-level view of what this housing bill means to the country.
Sure. Well, I think simply that Congress recognized what local officials have known for a long time, that we really have a housing crisis in many places in this nation, not everywhere certainly, but that the provision of affordable and available housing is a real issue. It's a quality of life issue, of course. It's what determines whether somebody that grew up in a community can stay in that community, can buy a home and live there if they have to move out. So local officials and then our members are the regional planning organizations have known, for a decade or more in many places, and sometimes in some places it goes back farther than that, but we've known for a long time that this was needed. Sometimes Congress is a little slower on the uptake. They don't always agree that it's an issue that needs federal attention, but I think we finally got to the point where that was recognized. And it really took creative bipartisan approaches in both the House and the Senate. It took folks that you might not have expected working together to come to some conclusion on what this means. But I think, recognizing that there really is the need for some policy change, for some resource allocation down to the local level to help turn the corner on some of the economics of developing affordable housing, for example, or housing at all, is a really important step. And of course, for regional organizations, there was a program established that ostensibly would be provided to regional organizations to do some of the planning work that's required in all of this. So that's a great step forward. We still need to, we're not done with that conversation, because that that funding is not yet available. We have to go to the Appropriations Committee and make sure that they recognize the importance and provide some funding for that. But it even recognizes the important role that regional organizations have to play in all of this this conversation. But I think it's a really important step just to have Congress come to the table and recognize that the federal government needs to play a role in helping make all of this happen.
And affordable housing is really an economic development issue. I work with communities every day that want to create jobs, that want to create a better quality of life for their community. And if they have a company that looks at their community and wants to create jobs, they have no housing. And so it's just one of the most difficult subjects, Eric, in my years of doing rural economic development that I've ever encountered.
Yeah, no, I absolutely understand that, and it's really a confounding one, and it's so different community by community too. There's so much that goes into convincing, even here in DC, it's even ward by ward, convincing folks that, that there are approaches that won't degrade your quality of life, but will provide opportunity for folks that are looking for affordable housing, or even housing at all that fits within their sort of economic means. It is a really tricky issue. But like you say, it's an essential issue for economic development. The two absolutely go hand in hand. So as do other things, transportation, and these are all tightly tied together. And it's very hard to have one without the others coming along with it.
I know you have a very deep background in transportation, and you just mentioned transportation. So what do you see in the future happening on the transportation front?
Sure. Yes. I've been the transportation wonk here in Washington for several decades now. It is the issue that drew me into federal policy. So I do love federal transportation policy. I think we're going to have a little bit of right now we're living under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the IIJA, which passed several years ago. That was a very transformative piece of legislation in many ways, but I think we're sort of going to live in the wake of that for a little while now. Transportation reauthorization is not going to happen this year, so we're going to be looking to the future on that. But I really think as we've been up on Capitol Hill talking to folks about reauthorization, one of the things that's actually gotten some of the most attention is a provision that we and others are supporting to try and get funding down to the RTPOs, to the rural transportation organizations, to do some of the same planning that goes on in the metropolitan areas presently. I'll tell you, when we're there in offices having these conversations about trying to get some of these resources down to some of the smallest communities that there are, some of the ears of the staff on Capitol Hill, their ears really perk up, because I think there's a feeling that in some parts of the country that they're not getting what they need out of the transportation authorization. So we're trying to sort of broaden the scope of the planning dollars, at least, that come through transportation. And then hopefully we can also do that and through some of the programmatic dollars eventually as well. So that's one area that we're excited on and we're focused on. We work in a really strong coalition here in Washington, and we feel like we've made really big strides in making the point to Congress that there needs to be more done at the local level through the federal transportation program. The program is ultimately a state program, and that's fine. That's how it's structured. But there is a really important local element to transportation legislation. And I think we've done a good job making the point that a bit more needs to be going down to the local level for local decision making and local project selection, and that the more we do of that, the more successful this program will be overall. So that's one of a couple of the things that we've been really focused on here during this reauthorization process.
Located in D.C., we've got midterm elections coming up. What happens to the legislative process as we lead up to the midterms? Does it come to a screeching halt?
Yeah, in some ways grinds to a halt, in other ways goes on hyperspeed. Depends on which piece of legislation you're talking about. Some things, if they're not done by now, they're not probably going to happen. I think I would certainly put transportation reauthorization legislation in that category. Other things, if there's a perception that it might be helpful for one or another group's reelection chances, you might see something go move really quickly. But overall, the whole process slows down. Right now, they're gone for their typical August recess, which is almost the entire month, and they'll come back. And I think maybe they have a handful, 15, 20, maybe legislative days remaining before they go out for an extended break until after the election. So it really does slow down pretty significantly. We don't expect to see a whole lot happen here in the next few months until we're past November and they come back for the so-called lame duck session.
For our listeners out there, and maybe that's not involved directly in economic development like we are, I've often thought, Eric, if you've got a constituent out here and they need to get a message to their senator or congressperson, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I mean, as a constituent, you've got a great voice in Washington. They're itching to hear from you. They want to know how you feel. Especially if you're not calling to scream at them, but you're actually calling to deliver an idea or a thought or an observation about something that you're experiencing in your life or in your community. Those are the types of calls that members of Congress love to receive, because it really is giving them a little bit of a sense of the pulse of what's going on in the communities that they represent. They can't be everywhere all the time. And so I think constituents sometimes maybe fail to recognize that even though they're just one person, they have a strong voice within these offices. These officials are elected, and they know that, and they want to be responsive to the things that they're hearing out there. So I think picking up the phone and calling an office directly is always good. Obviously, folks have other ways. You can, if you're engaged with a local group at home, sometimes those groups are politically engaged, but I think as an individual, if you've got something to say, I pick up the phone, or I think that's even better, honestly, than writing an email. I would make a phone call.
So local constituents can actually move the needle, and I think
so. I think if you've got something to say and it's from the heart, then they'll listen.
All right, we've got a couple of minutes left, Eric, and I want you to look into your crystal ball and look out at the future of regional councils. What do you see is in the future for organizations like ours, and the importance of what we do?
Sure. I see a very bright future, honestly, for regional organizations. I think some of the biggest challenges that we're seeing now, we talked extensively about data centers, for example, AI closely related to that. We have members that are positioning themselves, for example, to help their communities with some of the data that really is going to move toward more decision making happening through sort of an AI platform. And I think that's something that really is best done at the regional level. I think there's quite a few challenges that communities are recognizing are really big, really hard for them to solve on an individual basis, but potentially more reasonable to solve at the regional level. And so I think there's a great number of opportunities across a whole lot of policy areas where we can take that message up to Capitol Hill. We can let them know the great work that regions do. It's what we do all the time, letting them know the great work that happens at the regional level, and how regions can be part of the solution to many of the vexing policy issues that we have. So I think in that regard, I think there's a lot of opportunity for increased importance and value for regional organizations, large and small.
Well, Eric, on behalf of regional councils all across the nation, I want to thank you and your organization for what you do for all of us, because our work with local elected officials is highly important, and we could not do the things that we do unless we had an organization like the National Association of Regional Councils that support what we do. If we have listeners out there that want to find out more about your organization, I know you've got a website. Where can they go to find out more about the work you do?
Sure. Our website is narc.org. Go find us there, and you'll see a lot of the work that we do, our leadership, and you can contact us through the website as well.
Okay, our guest has been Erich Zimmermann, Executive Director of the National Association of Regional Councils. We appreciate him being with us today. And Erich, look forward to visiting again in the future.
All right. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us on Rural Strong. If you found this helpful, share it and follow the show for more insights from rural leaders making a real difference. Until next time, stay rural strong.